Is it an epic or epic failure? The Big Review. Movies, games, and TV in focus.
Pulse 95.
We are reviewing the fourth installment in the Matrix series, The Matrix Resurrections, that is basically picks up the story of Neo, who is now basically back to being Thomas Anderson and is inside the Matrix. And now there's a whole new mission of familiar faces and new faces who are trying to get him out of here and go off on another mission. Now, here's the thing. Mikhail and I have very strong opinions, so let's start off with the positives. How about that? So, one of the biggest positives for me in this movie, or sadly enough, one of the only positives, are the individual characters and some of their acting. For example, Jessica Henwick as Bugs and the amazing Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith, or the new version of Smith. I loved them very, very much. They basically stood out. I mean, even though Jessica Henwick's Bugs is the, typical kind of, let's say, legacy character, in the sense that this is a person who has lived through the golden age of what the previous protagonist has done, which is again a recurring trope, and now they're on a mission to fulfill whatever that original protagonist or legend wants to do, as in the typical hero and whatnot. And I love it, despite, even though it's cliched, she did her job and she did it really well. And I love Jessica Henwick all the way back from the unfortunate Iron Fist, all the way back in the I think it was back in 2016, 2015. And she is capable of, acting and, fulfilling her roles, and I loved her very much as her role as Bugs. And, of course, Jonathan Groff. Goodness, here's the thing. I did not even know that he was in that movie, but when I saw him, just chills everywhere. He is a fantastic, fantastic actor. We haven't seen him for a while, since Mindhunter and, of course, the Hamilton Broadway show. That was a couple of years ago, but he did reprise his role for the entire the movie that came out on Disney Plus. And of course, we cannot forget the fantastic Neil Patrick Harris. I loved him very much as the analyst / the therapist. But the saddest thing ever, especially when it comes to the analyst and Smith, is despite that they are just spectacular characters on their own, they still feel like you barely get anything from them. They're somewhat overshadowed, even though, again, the analyst is the antagonist, or one of the main antagonists of the movie.
Yeah, this movie is a big nostalgia trip to any fan out there who loves The Matrix. And some people may be bogged down by the fact that, where is the actor who plays the original Morpheus, or the actor who plays the original Agent
positive
Smith?
Things for
Yes.
Positive.
But I will say that despite their replacements, I found, for example, Morpheus, who was played by Yahya Abdul Mateen II, to be tolerable. He does shake.
I love how you're like, I'm like, Mikhail, give me the positive. It's
that is positive.
He's tolerable.
He's tolerable. He shakes up the character. He's a little bit more.
He's himself.
He's himself. He's more like somebody who's copying, because that's what he is. He's basically a sentient machine that is copying the previous Morpheus. I will say one thing that I did enjoy about this movie is that there's almost like somewhat of a technical reboot to the world of the Matrix. Things are a little bit different in terms of how illusion is played out. Yep. Not everything is connected to an Agent Smith virus that the fights against the rebels, or what do you call them? I think the people outside the Matrix. Instead, this time we have bots, and they're controlled by the analyst. There's also there's this whole thing with sentient machines who don't believe in the fact that they should fight against the humans, and rather they turn over and actually help the humans and outside the Matrix. So I like those little new concepts they put in there, that there is sort of like an after story from the original trilogy, what happens after Neo dies. But the biggest mystery that this movie carries, and the one that everyone's fascinated with, even though Neo dies in the third film, why is he alive in this one? And we explore, we tread that little story, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I think to some people they might find it satisfying. To others, like, I don't think this is enough, you know.
I think the latter sentiments are shared by a lot of people, because if you look at the reviews, because now we need to go to the negative parts of the movie, which unfortunately outweigh the positives, and it's just that, yes, it is a nostalgic trip, but perhaps too much of a nostalgic trip. Like, at some point, it felt more of a summary rather than a new story, because
oh my God, yes.
the new story part felt unfulfilling. I feel like at some point we were very lost in the movie. We're not too sure what's happening. I went with my friend who was equally lost, maybe less than halfway through the movie, and was like, do you mind if I leave? I'm like, no, you're not. You're not leaving the movie. But I do have to admit, I fell asleep during that movie. That even added to my confusion. So I admit that I did fall asleep. But again, if a movie makes you fall asleep, it's saying something, especially a movie as big as The Matrix. Now, for me, I know you called Morpheus adequate. The thing with Morpheus, I love Yahya Abdul-Mateen's version of Morpheus, but I don't get it. I don't get it.
Me neither.
Why do we have a new version of Morpheus? I genuinely do not get it.
Because I don't know what happened maybe in pre-production, but in the movie they do write it off. They tell you what happens to the original Morpheus.
I get that, but
and it was just a quick dialogue.
Again, yes, but doesn't make any sense. Yes, I know that they're much older. I believe they could have easily aged up the actual actors and actresses the way they did with Jada Pinkett Smith in her role as Niobe as well. So they're capable of doing it. Lawrence Fishburne, I'm pretty sure he would have been excited to reprise his role unless there were some issues within that. But the fact that he was a Morpheus/Smith made no sense, because we do have a Smith, a new version of Smith. That kind of makes sense because, like you said, the old version of The Matrix is kind of gone. This is a new one. That's
been rebooted by the
analysts. Yeah, so the fact that we have the new Smith is fine, but a new Morpheus, I just don't get it. They could have easily said that as his grandson. That could have worked better, honestly.
And that's the thing about this movie. There's a lot of like tech mumbo jumbo ran as plot devices, and to an average audience, it just goes way over your head. But we still haven't finished our review for The Matrix. We're still going to continue. But if you have a personal critique or an opinion about the film, do text us 4215. Let's take a bit of a break and continue our review of Matrix 4.
Pulse 95.
Let's continue our review of Matrix Resurrections, the fourth installment in the Matrix series. We tried to give the positive parts of the movie, and now we're delving deep into the negatives. And I think Mikhail has a lot of opinions about that as well, especially as a big fan of the series.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when I used to watch The Matrix. I watched it almost religiously. I never understood the core philosophy, and it always felt like a high concept kind of film that dealt with, like, is our world an illusion? Are we living in simulations? Do we truly have a choice in life, or is everything preordained? And this is some of the concepts that kind of live with you, and some fans always talk about how The Matrix has this big impact, and it did on the industry at that time. But 20 years have passed, and now the biggest question...
60.
Well, 60 in the story,
game, yeah.
But 20 years have passed in real life, and it's been. I'm surprised that they went out of their way to make this sequel, which is why the biggest question when you're watching this film: does it justify a sequel in the first place? And a lot of the time, as you're watching major beats of the story play out, you're like, not really worth the story. I don't know.
I agree with you.
There's very little conflict and tension most of the time. It just feels like we brought the story up just because. No other reason.
I feel that, yeah.
And maybe this, to some people, they want to revisit The Matrix. They love that nostalgia. And bear in mind, we're huge fans of Keanu Reeves. But there's something about his acting in this movie that just, like, as much as I love him as a person in real life, something about his performance in this movie, it just felt he wasn't putting that much effort. Like it just,
I agree with you.
It was not as good, and it
didn't.
showed.
Yes,
you know?
it did not feel like Neo was at all. I get it that this is a new version-esque of Neo because he's confused, but even in the first movie when, Thomas Anderson realizes he's Neo, the transition was quick because he realizes he's the one. It's like he was, okay, sounds a bit cliche, he was programmed to be the one from the get-go, so something turns on. Here, the only time this turns on is when he regains his powers, and that is it. He just appears very disheveled, very confused, very out of place. He's not sure about what he's doing, and I really did not like the fact that he kept repeating, I never believed I am the one or the chosen one. Like, I understand that maybe that trope appears to be cliched now in 2021 and 2020, but at the same time, that was what that movie was all about the one. And as cliched that trope is, it is an integral part of the movie. So him coming up and saying this, basically dismissing what he was in the previous 3 movies, makes absolutely no sense to me. Another good part is the fact that the gadgets, the gizmos, the hair, and the makeup felt very 90s, early 2000s-esque kind of sci-fi, which I love because it just said that we're keeping it true to the original trilogy. But beyond that, I felt, again, like you said, it was unnecessary. If anything, it felt like if you had just turned that into a comic, maybe, it felt like would have been a better material, even though I'm not telling you, because obviously we love and respect comics and comic artists. We're just saying that as a big, massive movie and the hype, we could have just translated it into a book that people can read at their own leisure and can easily go on and on and on for pages explaining many things, and perhaps maybe extending the stories and extending the character arcs of more than one character beyond what we saw on the screen. Because even though it was 2 hours and a half, I genuinely don't know why it was 2 hours and a half long.
It was a chore to watch, and when you feel that, when it feels like it's a chore, then there isn't that enjoyability that you expect from a movie like this.
And before you go on, can we just talk about the whole them trying to break the fourth wall with Warner Brothers wants to make another video game, and I'm like, goodness, that wasn't necessary. This isn't.
They done it in Space Jam 2.
I was about to say, this isn't Space Jam 2. What are you doing? That was just a little bit too much. I respect the Wachowski sisters. They're amazing, and they brought the original Matrix to life, and they basically spearheaded the sci-fi genre within the early 2000s, late 90s. I just feel like this fell really short, and it was a massive disappointment.
Yeah, and there are times where the special effects feel a little bit cheap. There was this effect they used to express slow motion, as if a character is faster than the other, and it felt so cheap. I don't know, it was very jarring to watch. But honestly, when it comes down to it, is this movie worth watching? Does it justify the sequel? Not necessarily. Nope. I think it's only enjoyable for the core fans of The Matrix who really want to go back down that nostalgia trip. But to the average viewer, the casual watcher out there, this movie is just going to fly over their head. They're going to be more confused than they are enjoying the movie for its entirety. So our final verdict for this movie, for me personally, it's a disappointing below average, so I'm going for a 4 out of 10 for Matrix 4.
I was going to be a little bit more forgiving. I would say 5 out of 10, but I'm just like fluctuating between 4 and 5, because again, loved Jonathan Groff, loved Neil, loved Jessica, but beyond that, and the makeup, love the makeup and the getup. And the story of IO now is very cool. The fact that they actually showed, we made a lot of progress in the past 60 years and whatnot. That was nice.
But that feels like an epilogue. It doesn't feel like it needs a whole movie.
The thing is, it felt also like, I know they don't want to fall into the usual tropes, so perhaps they needed to, because you know how usually what happens, they were even saying it. They're like, you might put the entirety of IO in danger. I think maybe he should have. Some kind of consequences should have gone there. As much as you as a viewer, like, that is so cliched. but at least it would have been, the stakes would have been higher beyond the character arc and the arcs that were happening in the story. The new generation, incredibly cool. I feel like there's potential for some sort of maybe spin-off TV show if Warner Brothers are thinking about it in terms of the new crew and their stories, but in terms of Neo and Trinity and Morpheus and whatnot,
it's been concluded 20 years ago.
Exactly. Why do we have this? So I'm gonna go with a 5 out of 10, which gives us a score of 4.5 from Mikhail and I, and that is our review of The Matrix Resurrection. Stay tuned. We've got so much to talk about. Lots of Marvel and Spider-Man news, among other things, including Uncharted, the movie, coming up next right here on the Afternoon Karak.
Speculation, gossip, or hoax. Rumor has it.
Rumor has it that Tobey Maguire is set to appear in the Multiverse of Madness and get his own Spider-Man 4 movie. Now, this comes from dailyexpress.co.uk. So are they reliable? Are they not? We're not really sure, but they're the ones who are spearheading this news. I mean, they're the ones spreading it everywhere, and I saw it on Reddit, and people were like, okay, maybe, but why would he appear in Multiverse of Madness?
That I'm not entirely sure of, but I have to look back. Based on just historical reports, there was supposed to be a Spider-Man 4 movie in the works, and it was going to come out sometime, I think, 2011, 2012. But I think because of the somewhat substantial failure of Spider-Man 3 in theaters, Sony just like, let's wrap it up. We're not going to do any more of these Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. Mm-hmm. And one thing that connects a dot to this is that the reshoot, the 6 weeks worth of reshoots that are happening, Kevin Feige himself said that reason why we're doing these reshoots is because we want to add a little bit more. We want to have a little bit more fun because we felt inspired by Spider-Man No Way Home.
What he actually said as well is that some people, actually no, that was a rumor, or that was speculation, if I remember correctly. Sorry for misjudging that. If I remember, they said that they realized that there were some actors and actresses, they didn't mention who were unavailable, are now free. So they were like, let's do some reshoots and let's fix up some things. And it makes sense. It makes sense.
It has a little bit of merit. Just a little bit of merit.
And the thing is, Fandom Wire, who are the ones who correctly scooped that both Maguire and Garfield's Peter Parkers would be Spider-Man No Way Home, reported this claim all the way last year around this time.
Okay.
They're the ones who were like, this is happening. And now express.co.uk were like, yeah, that's definitely happening. So basically what's happening is that the rumors are circulating between people, and people who have, publications are getting scoops here and there, probably anonymous sources, or maybe a friend of a friend of a friend. Now, Spider-Man 4 is a more, I'd say, viable rumor, but Tobey Maguire appearing, I'm leaning towards not really, but anything can happen at this point.
Yeah.
Especially
there's petitions for Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Yes, that's also more likely to happen in my opinion than Tobey Maguire appearing, but I'm not putting that idea all the way back in the shelf. I'm not shoving it up there at the back of my head. I think that there is potential that this might actually be true.
Yep.
Who knows?
Crazier things have happened.
Exactly, even though it's only like 30% in my opinion, but 30% is still big enough for this because we can't really think of why he would be there, but maybe Doctor Strange calls them out for some help, maybe through the multiverse. We don't know. As usual, we wait and see, especially since we're going to be needing to wait a long time, unfortunately. No more waiting in March anymore. But let's talk about what is happening in March, and that is the Academy Awards. And according to Sony and Marvel, they are very committed to giving Spider-Man No Way Home an Oscar push, which is very interesting because the last time that happened was with Black Panther and hasn't really happened since. Let's talk about that coming up next right here on the Afternoon Karak.
If you liked this episode of Afternoon Karak, drop a like and subscribe.
Pulse 95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.